Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chats with the Cats. I'm Brad Stone, your host, and with me today I have another Brad. Brad Shepik is joining us, and for those of you who don't know, Brad has been a long time um, member of the progressive music scene in New York. I hope that you find that accurate, Brad. Um, a stellar guitarist, and he is gracious enough to join us today. Welcome, Brad.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's we were saying before I pushed record that I was saying that it's really cool after all these years of following your career to finally have a chance to chat with you and meet you, and hopefully I'm going to see you in person in New York in January. But so, Brad, you've had a long career. You've played with a lot of people. You've had your own releases out. But what I really want to focus in on is this new. I've got it up here. This new album of yours called "Human Activity: Dream of the Possible." And I guess you kind of call the band that you're with Human Activity. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the album title's really Dream of the Possible. It's on Shifting Paradigm Records, in case you'd like to pick up a copy. I'd highly recommend it. I love this album, Brad. In fact, I listened to it again last night, and I'm going to start playing it on my radio program here on soulandjazz.com, the creative source. Uh, it's an album. Let's see if you agree with this description. It's it's kind of on the progressive side and yet highly accessible. I think it's very melodic. I think it would be very radio friendly, um, but and still kind of pushing the envelope at times.
Yeah. Well, I have so many great collaborators on this project, including the musicians, and they really shine on this album for me. And I always knew that I wanted to have violin on this project, and that I wanted it to be very melodic, and I wanted it to, I didn't want to think about it very much. The process of composing was pretty much first thought, best thought, and I recorded a lot of the things just with my iPhone and pieced them together. This was in 2021, and when it came time to record the album, we had a rehearsal and we had a 6-hour recording date, and that was it. And it's for me. I feel a lot of magic happened that day, and I'm glad that we captured some of it, because I really respect these musicians, and so far people have really responded to the the melodicism and just the sound of the overall group. To have violin and the way the way Amino plays the piano is very different than the normal regular jazz piano player. Everybody has a very individual voice.
So you kind of touched on something that I was, really champing at the bit to ask you, and that is, when you came up with the concept for this album, did you have the particular sound in your head? You mentioned the fact that you wanted to have a violin. So did you had a concept and then selected the players, or did you put the band together and then kind of see what happens?
Well, it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that, because it gives me another chance to shout out my buddy Sam Minai, who plays bass on this record and who mixed and mastered the record. We had been playing as a trio with John Hadfield and Sam Minai, and so I knew I wanted to play with them because John has an incredible palette on the percussion, world percussion, and I wanted to include some of my stringed instruments like the Bulgarian tambra and Turkish saz and banjo, and have that sort of texture that's got an acoustic texture that would blend well with the violin. And when I asked Sam who should I get on piano, he didn't waste 1 second in saying get Amino Belliamani. And I already knew about Amino, but I didn't know what a great piano player he was. And so he's the leader of Inav Ganawa, and he's a real expert on Moroccan rhythms and West African rhythms, as well as being a classically trained pianist and just a really interesting, innovative pianist. And we had been working with another great violinist named Maz Swift. And when Maz wasn't available anymore, I had to reach out to Sam. And I said, "Hey, Sam, who do we get for violin?" And Sam, without a hesitation, he suggested Leal, and who he'd been playing with. So, and we did a gig and a rehearsal, and that was it. That's all we needed for that to become a band. So,
And the record has a definite, I mean, to my ears, Middle Eastern sound or flavors to it, and yet again, it's highly accessible, highly melodic. I find it, well, let me. I love the title track. I also love. I like a lot of the tracks, but I think All Hands is the one that I selected for my program that I'll be recording tomorrow for this upcoming week. But it just has a great sound. You should tell Sam for me that I think he did a masterful job on the mixing and mastering.
I will. And I tell him almost every day. He's actually just mastered a new trio record with John and I that's going to come out in the spring, and it sounds gorgeous, so he's my guy.
Well,
I'll tell him though.
as does this record. I mean, it's one of those that you just want to crank it up because it sounds so clean, that yeah, it's very well done. Are you guys going to be doing some tours with this particular
Yes,
group?
we are in the process of booking some things. We've been talking to some folks on the West Coast and talking to some folks in Europe, and we're going to be at Winter Jazz. So hopefully some folks will get to hear us. And yeah, I see us playing this music, for the next couple years. We're trying to get as many folks to hear it live as we can, and share it with folks. I feel good about this project, and I want folks to hear it.
Well, I really do hope that you make it out here to the West Coast and that I get to see you out here too. But hopefully, I'll see you in New York. Um, so, tell me about your one of the things I'm really interested in and that I really emphasize on my program, the Creative Source, is original composition. And I always want to hear an artist's originals. And tell us a little bit more about how you go about approaching composition. Is it really kind of tailored to the particular members of the group, or is it more preconceived notions, or maybe some kind of blend of the two?
It's a blend, but definitely the folks who are going to play it, I have a pretty good idea of who's going to play it. And because that's important. You don't want to write things that are, that are too complicated, or, or too simple or whatever. You want to write things for people so that they can express themselves. That's what I like to hear. I like to hear people express themselves, so that's who I want to play with, people who are into that. And so this music is, on paper, it's very simple kind of looking, but there's some tricky rhythms, there's some tricky meters, there's some
Yeah.
tricky harmonies. And since Lael was involved in the project, we could go there with some quarter tone things and some other ideas from Middle Eastern music. It really, she lent such a melodic flavor to every piece on this. And of course, I played a lot with Simone Shaheen and Bassam Saba over the years, and I've been to the Middle East, and I played with Bulgarian musicians and Roma musicians, Macedonia, still do, and so that's part of my musical world too. And I wanted to have all of that on this, as well as the jazz as well. It's all that's always going to be in there. Um, but yeah, the musicians are really in my back of my mind when I go to compose, for sure, definitely.
So it's interesting that you brought up odd meters because last night when I was re-listening to your record, I forget which track it was, but I was trying to count it out, and figure it out, and I was having a hard time.
I think it's all fives and sevens and sixes and fours. Still heat is kind of a tricky one for me. Um, that's in a kind of a slower seven, and some of the phrasing is a little tricky. But I didn't want it to be tricky. I wanted it to be like, oh, this is melodic and yeah, I just wanted to have a space where people could just sort of meditate on this music, and without getting too complicated.
It probably was still heat that I was. Oh, was it still heat or all hands? I don't remember, but the thing about odd meters, which I've always been drawn to, but when musicians make it just flow and sound so natural, which you guys obviously do. So I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, I think originally for me, I learned them from dance rhythms, like Balkan dance rhythms, as opposed to like, maybe math rock approach. Um, so it took me a long time to sort of get into the feel of some of these rhythms. And it was brick by brick, that kind of work, and playing with musicians that played that stuff. And they were generous, and just hearing them, it's like a language. You got to hear people speak it, and then you can get involved too. So I'm in there in some small way, trying to do that too. So, but I have students that are into math rock and former students that are in like metal bands and stuff, and the things they play in odd meters just they cross my eyes. They're so confused, But that I love that stuff. I mean, it's incredible. It's just
I do too.
yeah.
I'm a big old time progressive rock guy, old time and new time. So
Right.
love that stuff. So, Brad, we've got a little bit of time left. Why don't you take a few minutes and maybe tell us about your upbringing and your musical background. I know that you've played with a lot of the cats, so maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how far back you want to go, but when I was a kid, my dad and his brothers played music. They played guitars and sang. So that always looked fun to me. So as soon as I could get involved with that, I did. My dad gave me a book, learn G, C, D, and I was off to the races. They got me some $10 guitar lessons at the local music store with a great teacher named Bill Young. And yeah, it was all music and sports all the way through middle school, going to the library and checking out, everything from Charlie Parker to Miles Davis and John Coltrane to weird looking records that I didn't know the names of the instruments, like bouzouki or, what is this? I would just take it home and listen to it. And I was just into it. And, you know, finally, I decided in high school, I think I decided I'm going to live in New York City because I got to go there. I got to go see what that's all about. And, I grew up in Seattle, and got really involved in the scene out there. Had some great teachers like Julian Priester, and James Knapp and Chuck Deerdorf and Dave Peterson and Dave Peck and Jay Clayton and of course Jerry Granelli, and all these people kind of uh, contributed, to how you can do this, get involved in music. And so I moved to New York and got involved. And um, I I met some folks right away who were in the Balkan music scene and combining Balkan music and jazz. And so I got really kind of involved in several groups in that vein, like the Dave Douglas Tiny Bell Trio and Matt Dario's Paradox Trio and Pachora with Chris Speed and Jim Black and Schoolie Sparrison. We have a new record that's going to come out with that group. And
Great.
but yeah, and then then slowly towards the end of the 90s, I started to really think about, what do I want to do? And that's when I started to, sort of combine all these different ideas with the jazz that I had been playing. At an earlier point in there, Bill Frisell had recommended me to Paul Motion to be in this band that he was starting called the Electric Bebop Band, which was an amazing experience, which I did for 5 or 6 years and played on a couple records and toured Europe many times. And I learned so much from that experience playing with Paul and Steve Swallow and Jerome Harris and all the people that passed through that band when I was in it. Kurt Rosenwinkel and Josh Redman and Chris Potter and Chris Cheek, and I played some gigs with Wolfgang Muspiel also in that band. So yeah, and that led to some other things, playing with Carla Bley in her Escalator Over the Hill project and Charlie Hayden's Liberation Music Orchestra. And yeah, so those were, just treasures of my life to be able to play with those folks and play their music with them.
I think it may be possible that I saw you live in Spain, um, and I'm trying to think of what year it would have been, but I went a number of years in a row to the Jazz Al Dia in San Sebastian. You played there, didn't you?
Yeah, I played there a couple times. Yeah, I played
Yeah.
there with Dave, and I played there with Matt Dario a couple times, maybe, and maybe with Alexis Quadrado too. I think maybe
I think it might
possibly.
have been with Dave that when I saw you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I want to recommend everyone to check out this album. Whatever is your favorite format, buy a copy if you can afford to do so. A digital download, a CD, whatever format suits your fancy. Brad Shepik and Human Activity, Dream of the Possible on Shifting Paradigm Records. It's a very compelling album. And you'll be hearing some tracks on my program, The Creative Source. And Brad, I'm going to conclude by asking you this question that I ask everyone, which is there something that um, lately has really struck your fancy, either a book that you've read recently or a movie that you've seen, or maybe somebody else's album that you've been checking out?
Oh boy, so many things just pop right into my head. So the latest album that I was checking out was Ben Monder's new album called Planetarium. We had a listening party at Barbez last week for that, and we just a bunch of us got together. Ben called us all, you know, and we listened to the whole record, and it was just wonderful. Just like, I mean, I spent so many hours with that album last weekend, and it was just really special. I know it's something that a lot of people will enjoy. It's got so many different facets of Ben's music in it, and Theo Bleckman is just singing so wonderfully on it, and it's 3 hours long, and it's just gorgeous. So many different colors and vibes in that. And then another artist that I've been checking out that I just found out about is this Azerbaijani guitar player named Namazoglu. Elman Namazoglu. And he's just the most amazing guitar player that I've ever heard in my life. And I can't even describe it, but it's like just so beautiful, melodic and beautiful and technically incredible. And I guess the last incredible book that I read was this trilogy by Octavia Butler called Lilith's Brood. And yeah, it's I can't even describe it. It's just if you're into science fiction, you will love Octavia Butler's Lilith's Brood. It's an incredible trilogy.
I'm going to have to check that out. And
Yeah,
thank you for the recommendations for us. Coincidentally, right before I listened to your album for the second time, I listened to that whole Ben Monder Planetarium. And in fact, I'm going to include a track on my upcoming program as well. So
amazing.
great minds think alike.
Yeah. Yeah, Ben is an artist that has always astounded me. He's the first guitar player I met in New York in 1987 before I moved here.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, man, if everybody's playing the guitar like him, I should not be coming to New York anytime soon. But yeah, it's just been amazing to see him, the music that he's put out over the years. And this particular record, this last one, is just it's incredible. It's a monumental record.
It sure is. And in CD format, it's a triple CD. So,
Yeah.
but definitely worth getting. It's a nice package. Well, listen, Brad, I want to thank you for taking some time to chat with us here on Chats with the Cats, soulandjazz.com. It's an absolute delight and pleasure to finally connect with you. And I really do hope to see you in person very soon.
Oh, me as well. Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. You take care.
Okay, thanks now. Bye.
Bye now.
www.soulandjazz.com.